The Easter story isn't just about the resurrection. It's about the tomb as well. And this is our story as well, because we have to both emotionally, mentally, and physically rest in order to do the awakening and the demonstrating of the oneness of God that will change the world. We have to rest. We have to be in the tomb just as much as we awaken and do our work in the world. So we got to start rewriting this Easter narrative about we have to escape the tomb. No, I say stay in the tomb a little longer if you have to. And rest. We have to rest in order to demonstrate. We have to rest before we do the work and while we're doing the work to create a world of love and justice and equity. We have to rest in order to switch the narrative and begin to truly create a culture, an anti-racist culture. And what do I mean by that? There's a sense that maybe you felt it, I know I've felt it, but especially living in this country, there is always a sense of urgency, a sense of, I gotta be productive, I gotta get it right, and if I don't, something a little bit wrong with me. These ideas are not by accident. These ideas are what we call in the anti-racist world, we call these white supremacy culture norms. This idea of your worth is equal to your productivity. And if you think about that for a second, this is how the enslaved bodies, the enslaved black bodies were judged. Those who could do the most work were ones who had the same value. And that idea continues to permeate hundreds and hundreds of years later, not just through this country, but major parts of the world. Your worth is your productivity. You know what your worth is? Your worth is the fact that you exist. You are worthy simply because you exist. You don't have to prove nothing to nobody. You are worthy simply because you exist. So one of the ways we subvert these cultural norms is by taking a rest. Taking some time in the tomb before we awaken and we rise up. And especially if you were a black woman or a black woman of color, this is really important because let's be clear, when we look at the history of this nation, black women are the ones who've had to work the hardest. When we talk about sexism in this country, and we look at things, for example, like the gender wage gap, when we look, for example, at the women who are in positions of authority and management and leadership in the corporate world and other places, when all these things negatively affect women, even more so they negatively affect black women and Hispanic women and Asian women. This is the idea we call intersectionality. And black women have been taught you've got to work even harder. Not just work harder to get further, but then put mothering on top of it and taking care of a family. Rest. Rest is one of the most powerful forms of resistance to this idea. So when we talk about Easter moving forward, let's talk about the awakening to our spiritual consciousness. Let's talk about the getting out and demonstrating. But let us talk with equal amount of time and importance about resting in the tomb. There's a reason why Jesus was crucified on Friday and he didn't roll that stone back, I don't know when. But let's assume that it didn't happen till close to Sunday. There was a period of rest. The narrative is he went into hell and conquered death. My thing with that is, well, if he went down to hell and conquered death, why is there still hell? Think about that for a second. Right? There was no going down, there was no conquering, there was none of that. There was rest. There was stillness. There was acceptance of self. And as our co-founder Charles Fillmore says, gathering strength for the power of greater demonstration. So if there's two things you remember from this talk today, one of them is that you are worthy simply because you exist. And two, if you want to make bigger demonstrations, take more rest. Take more rest.